Will you join me in a spirit of prayer? Gracious God, help us to become masters of ourselves so that we might become the servants of others. Take our minds and think with them. Take our lips and speak through them. Take our hands and work with them. And take our hearts and set them on fire with your Spirit. Amen. When I lived in Seattle, pretty much every Saturday morning, I would head to Starbucks at the University Village to put the hopefully finishing touches on my sermon. And invariably, there was a guy there called Bill. And since I did this for years and years, I got to know Bill. Bill had he had deep-seated resentments towards his father. And the thing that over time was striking to me is that he would say the same stories over and over again. And then there were also resentments towards his former employer and his wife. And as a result, he was disconnected from his family. He didn't speak to his daughter nor his brother. And, you know, as someone who wasn't in the midst of that, I could see how the brokenness in this family, how the brokenness that started early created such fissures that now seemed insurmountable. Also, as someone who has officiated at funerals for more than 30 years of ministry, I have been in situations where family members would have nothing to do with the passing of that quote unquote loved one. You know, they might pay for the funeral, but as far as they were concerned, they were washing their hands of whatever remnants remained of that relationship with the deceased. Maybe that's why this parable today resonates so deeply, because it's about families. It's about one family that is broken, which in ways small or large could be any of our families. And even though for most of us, perhaps we have not found ourselves precisely in the place where Bill is, or found ourselves experiencing being at a funeral, the kind of funeral that I described just now, I expect that we can imagine ourselves in the parable before us. And yes, I get this older brother type. The older brother type being resentful and fed up with the apparently wayward family member, the little brother. And you know what? Let's just not call him wayward. Let's call it for what it is. A toxic family member. And from this distance, I can see in this parable how the older brother's resentment, holding on to his resentment, harms not only the relationship they have with the brother, but their relationship with themselves, and how that resentment also damages their relationship with the parent, that is to say, God. And yet today, if I'm honest, I'm wondering about this too familiar story this time through, because I think it is too easy to say that this is just a moral tale about, hey, you should not hold on to resentments, especially with those who deserve to be held in resentment. We've heard this our whole lives, haven't we? I certainly have. That sense that we should take the high road. And especially given that the context of this parable falls right after religious leaders are complaining, muttering amongst themselves how Jesus is hanging out with sinners. It seems like it would be a simple moral tale. And yet, I wonder if we need to see ourselves in the one who is so apparently undeserving of being welcomed back. My sense is, and until we can do that, nothing ever changes. Nothing ever changes in our familiar relationships, let alone in our relationships with community and beyond. Until we can begin to, even in a small way, see with the eyes of God's love for the other who we are too often willing to exclude, it seems to me nothing changes. It's not enough, I wonder, if it's not enough to hold the mirror up and see myself, oh yeah, I'm like the older brother now. Yeah, I get that. Or to notice it in the unwelcoming hierarchy in other institutions. Oh, look at them. They're othering people. They're judging. I don't think it's enough. I wonder what it looks like to totally immerse ourselves in what we know of the experience, the possible experience and story of the younger brother. And this is where it got difficult for me, but I'll just throw out some creative possibilities. The younger brother, this one who probably always lived in the shadow of his responsible older brother. This one who perhaps sought to make his mark on the world in a different way than anyone he had ever known. This one who was seemingly unafraid to venture into the world on his own terms, even to a far distant place where language and custom and culture were likely far different from anything he had ever experienced before. This one who had an appetite for adventure and who was willing to risk it all, and who did, and who lost it all. and who found himself far from home, hungry and alone. This one, who was just able to begin to imagine himself going home again, but from the very small little box, understanding that, oh, if I do go back, it will be as a slave. And yet, even with that very narrow hope, tiny flickering hope, he risked it all again to go home. This one. Can you see yourself in him even a little bit? Can you imagine yourself sharing his oh so small imagination of what might be possible? Maybe I can be a slave. And can you even for an instant rest in the wonder of that welcome beyond measure? That welcome that is yours simply because you are a beloved child. We will have to peel away the layers to get there, it seems to me. Many of us have to look at the resentment of the older brother square on. And also realize that it diminishes us, it depletes us even now. I think especially of this story and how it is so appropriate right now as we consider, if you will, those who have gone off to the far country and left us in the midst of the pandemic. We who were doing the right thing and following the rules and everything like that. And now, should they quote unquote return, what will our welcome be? Will we be able to shed our resentment? I think many of us have to look at resentment and the resentment that comes from that older brother square on and recognize that it diminishes and depletes us even now. And it seems to me strangely that we get there and see that it diminishes us by recognizing the younger brother in all of us. Because I think the story only opens up when we can see ourselves in the younger one. And the transformation that's possible in doing that. It seems to me it's only then that our hearts are broken open a little bit to see God's love for the other as well as for ourselves. And we can come in from the field and join the party. May it be so. Amen.